Hello. At the beginning of all my courses, I typically give a little introduction to the students on how to engage with the teaching materials in order to most efficiently convert information to knowledge. And this is not really my area of expertise, but I learned about this from my wife, who teaches first year mathematics. There is one concept that's kind of common regardless of what material we teach or learn. It's referred to in education and psychology as a curve of forgetting. So it basically, the main idea is that if you learn some information, then after about 24 hours, so one day, you lose 50 to 80% of that information. And that continues further on. In another day, you lose half of what remains, and by about 30 days from the original time that you've heard the piece of information, you retain only 2 or 3% of it. That actually doesn't work very well in the typical academic term, because by that time the midterm exams approach, and the students are not in a very good situation. This fortunately can be remedied very quickly if we review the material periodically. There are many good news. It doesn't matter, for example, in what way we review the information. We could listen to recordings, we could replot the data by hand, we can just reread the notes. As long as we engage with the data, we bring up the amount of the information that we've lost in the previous 24 hours to nearly 100%, and then actually it doesn't take as much time to review it the second time to retain the lost material again, and so forth. So this is a very powerful technique. It's called spaced repetition. You need to review or come back to the material periodically, several times after you've heard it for the first time. And I realized that this topic, although it's very popular in education right now, it's been around for a while. I actually came across this first in the context of chess in the early 2000s. Michael Della Mazza published a controversial in chess circles book called Rapid Chess Improvement, and he outlined this strategy of improving the tactical skills. It's basically recognizing the situations on the chessboard that are typical, so you can rapidly make plausible decisions during the game. And since then, that concept has been developed. There are much more more widely accepted books that exist nowadays. There is a famous book called Woodpecker Method by Axel Smith and Hans Tikkanen that teaches precisely that. There are apps developed that are aimed at precisely timing the moments where you have to review the material in order to kind of commit it to memory. And this actually, it goes beyond the raw repetition. It's actual understanding and recognition of patterns go hand in hand there. And so I think it's well worth adopting. Just as a historical note, I looked into this, and the original concept of the curve of forgetting was introduced by a German psychologist. His name is Hermann Ebbinghaus. It was the late 1880s that he published a study. It was, as far as psychology studies go, it was not very complete. He just ran an experiment on himself, but he introduced this concept that the amount of information retained in memory decays exponentially with time. And this concept of the curve of forgetting stems from that research. So basically, if we plot on the vertical axis the amount of information retained and as a function of the time in the number of days, then the curve follows an exponential relation of some sort. The exact values of parameters depend on the nature of the data set. But basically, if at the end of this the first day or somewhere within that first crucial 24-hour period, we review the material and bring up the amount of information that we remember and understand back to 100%. Then in the second day, that amount goes down again, so we still lose some information. But then if at the end of the second day we come back for review, we don't have to review that much anymore. And by the way, these curves, these exponents, they become shallower and shallower in time. So each review period would take progressively less time for us to stay on top of the information that we learned. So that's the main idea. There is one interesting concept that kind of points out on how to avoid an overload with this. You can imagine that if you learned a lot of new information every day, then, and you also committed to doing this spaced repetition or review of the material, then at some point in the future there will be perfect storm when you will have to review a lot, and it would just be unmanageable in terms of time. So there is kind of an obvious in retrospect but very profound corollary from this that states that you shouldn't learn too much in every single initial learning period, because otherwise you won't be able to keep up with the proper review regimen. So for example, back to the chess example, if you're planning, say as a non-professional chess player, that if you're planning to study chess for no longer than 1 hour in each given day, then you probably shouldn't be learning new tactics for more than 20 minutes in a day, because otherwise a few days later you would be faced with a lot of review material. So anyway, this is I think it's fun, and the power of this technique is that it really applies to anything we do as kind of knowledge workers. The transformation of information to knowledge is not a trivial thing, so any advantage we can get, we should use. So hopefully that's useful. All right, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.